Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to begin reading my latest essay, Gothic Intersectionality. The essay is large enough that I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. Those parts I'll go over in a moment. Just know that this is part 1. The point of the video is to address things that have to do with intersectionality, and intersectionality being something that people on the left more broadly are calling for around the world. That includes people like me, and that includes other people as well. So that's what the essay is about, and I'm going to start reading. That being said, while I'm essentially reading this as a script, i.e., a largely completed essay, I'm still going to make small mistakes, but hopefully ones that don't conflict with what I'm trying to say. Also, I've cropped the nudes in this essay to make them as accessible as I can. However, I have cropped some of them even more, e.g. this image here of Kubu, to make it as accessible as possible for YouTube. So I'm cropping it and then cropping it again. It's annoying, but otherwise YouTube, which is automated by bots, will censor my work, which I don't want to have happen. Lastly, before we get started, if you like my work, you can like, share, and subscribe. I'll have some links in the description of the video. However, there are plenty of people I work with, including John and Jessie, whose work I find equally valuable. I will include them in the work cited, and you should definitely go and support them as well. Gothic intersectionality and applying it to other workers, or an antidote to Prometheus, fascism, and its cannibalism under capital, magic potions and seeds. July 16th, 2026. Gothic intersectionality continues a prior examination of capital, building on white straight guys with beards and or diplomas, or Western Marxism and its flaws, transphobia, and other bigotries in the anti-Zionist movement. That essay focused on the individual, concluding that certain individuals, e.g. the Tabernacle, were playing God in bad faith. Its follow-up, switching gears, emphasizes systemic predation. To do so, it coins Gothic intersectionality to explore capital as Promethean, its emphasis on transformative consumption in duality, the magic potion seed trope, and intersectionality challenging state predation, the raping of nature vis-à-vis 2 other works, Duncan and Aspinall's The Hidden Roots of Neoliberal Fascism, and Jessie Gender's The Grand Platner Allegations Have Leftist Men Telling on Themselves, which both focus on intersectionality too, though not through a Gothic lens like I do. Instead of state vampirism, which is usually more steady but less drastic, i.e. neoliberalism drinking fluids that regenerate, meaning workers, our focus here is state cannibalism, which is more drastic, more sudden, i.e. fascism eating fluids that won't regenerate, meaning state organs and generational wealth. Both are facets of state predation, whose transformative mendacious consumption workers challenge in duality, the Promethean qualities thereof, a term I coined and will delve into as we go. Gothic intersectionality being a new term of mine, which outlines my medievalist approach to intersectionality, this paper stipulates holistic teamwork, including awareness through tactical unity, mindful of Gothic poetics, play equals work to weaponize induality against a predation, vampirism, cannibalism as a Promethean enterprise, i.e. through the various anti-predation, defensive engagements under Gothic communism, a holistic discipline, which mid-development allow intersections, encounters with, and the mendacious consumption, production, and passage of data useful to transformation, escape from within breaking state monopolies, capitalist realism, fight fire with fire, e.g. potions, seeds, and eggs, reifying the so-called final product of state predation, warning of a cycle thereof that hijacks life and death to canonically shapeshift and serve dead labor. the longer definition given deeper in. Too long, the state rapes nature to glut itself drunk. We fight fire with fire, eating their liver, our stolen power, as the eagle does to Prometheus. Avengers aren't nice, land back or otherwise, our focus being labor back, specifically sex back. That includes the gross stuff, aka hard kinks, which while there is space for in Gothic, e.g. toilet stuff, and the performative fetishization of danger in domestic spaces below, I don't tend to explore much. Re, what I will and won't exhibit, from paratextual documents. Mendacious consumption being the poetic merger of food and lies, this transformative predation, anti-predation device of cryptonomy and objection will explore deeper in, during Healing the Soil. Food, bread and circus or not, contains many different things. Some are good, some not so good, under most circumstances. With poison, normally bad, unless counteracting poison, and some likened to poison, with or without irony, thus quotes, e.g. sex, which cuts both ways, food that's better than sex, and sex that's poisonous and or junk food, achieving different aims. Re, Gothic schlock syndrome. This includes poetic examples, their ensuing food for thought metaphors, tackling bigotry tied to food history and its expression, e.g. sex work treated like food, as cakes to carve, peaches to slice, pies to bake, and classically exploitative ways to subvert. Re, nature is food. However, it also includes literal food, which can literally poison you if not handled with care. Food is commonly a weapon then, with poison being one of the oldest, often called a woman's weapon, despite the usual double standards. Table of Contents. Note, I've expanded Gothic Intersectionality since first publishing. Table of Contents included, and while I've made numerous changes throughout, the clear and obvious addendums are in bold and color-coded. Purse, 7/16/2026. P.S. Though technically a work in progress, Gothic Intersectionality is mostly complete. Mostly. It also concerns the Promethean myth differently than I have previously, or through the magic potion seed trope. To see my earlier works on the Promethean quest tied to Little Gothic BDSM, which both return here, refer to Gothic ludology, which camps the white Indian trope to reclaim the land. And Monster Mom, Mary Shelley's endless legacy and effect on me, from reviewing Del Toro's Frankenstein and celebrating Mary Shelley's immortal legacy. Postscript, changelog, from 7/17/2026 to 7/24/2026. Shortened some definitions, moving most of it to footnotes, signposted some more stressing the Promethean character of cannibalism and duality, added saying thanks to celebrate Jessie and John's work, added white load on front-loading things, cropping the pinup, and following Alice from older arguments, featuring my muse, the first one, Blood Bunny, added new terms, eco-Socialism, more signposting throughout, wrote dedication to Bay, and expanded on caveats, expanded more on caveats, who mentioned the struggles of my friends, Squid Tips, Essence of Thought, and Jessie Gender, renamed some definitions to Setting the Table. So here I'll be reading part 1, which includes the disclaimers concerning state vampirism, new terms, eco-Socialism, eco-Socialism continued, dedication to Bay and birthday wishes, wide load on front-loading things, cropping the pinup and following Alice from older arguments, featuring Blood Bunny, saying thanks to John and Jessie, and the preface. Part 2 will read applying Gothic intersectionality to other workers, specifically setting the table, and part 3 will read roots and intersection or fight fire with fire. And yeah. Disclaimers. Gothic Intersectionality is part of my sex positivity book series, which continues after its June 2025 finale in small form content, e.g. essays on and interviews with other sex workers, all of whom I credit on my acknowledgements pages and sex work page. This piece doesn't focus entirely on sex work, but widespread exploitation that includes sex work as problem solution, i.e. in a shared predatory system, hoarding nature and workers out in highly abject ways. For the visually impaired, I shall read this essay when complete on my YouTube channel, which we're doing right now. Disclaimer regarding essay contents: all opinions are my own, i.e. as part of my research conducted alongside my book series, Gothic Communism. The material within is written, speaks about public figures and popular media for purposes of sex education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation obscenity laws. The Miller Test. Click here for my entire series disclaimer. Lastly, many of the links on this page lead to my age-gated 18+ website, where my entire work on Gothic communism is stored and exhibited. Content warning. Racism, transphobia, sexism, whorephobia, fascism, genocide, racism, and rape, taboo Gothic themes, cannibalism, environmental destruction, ecocide, suggestive imagery, crop nudes, and one photo of public nudism tied to nature. See Healing the Soil. Rape meaning, for my definition, to disempower someone or somewhere, a person, culture, or place in order to harm them, generally through fetishizing and alienizing acts or circumstances, socio-material conditions that target the mind, body, and or spirit. Rape can be of the mind, spirit, body, and or culture, the land, or things tied to it during genocide, etc. It can be individual and or on a mass scale. Source: Psychosexual Martyrdom. Concerning keywords, my arguments rely on various keywords I've previously coined, which here present well in bold and color-coded, usually only once, while stressing their keyword status, e.g. Little Gothic BDSM, Metroidvania, or the palliative numinous. While some are given here in abridged form, Paratextual Gothic Documents provides all neologisms in full. Concerning state vampirism, this piece, essay, or otherwise is part of a larger series on state vampirism. As I conceive it, state vampirism equals feeding through the state mid-abjection, be it openly capitalist or Marxist-Leninist. These are largely questions of aesthetic, whose Promethean self-destructive function extends to other configurations of omolus, e.g. Zionism. Furthermore, there's overlap between my anti-Zionist work and my work critiquing Marxist-Leninism, state vampirism alongside capital, so consider reading both. Abjection, which state predation and revolutionary action both rely on to function, i.e. on the aegis as something to further or reverse mid-vampirism through paid, unpaid labor, or me vis-à-vis Julia Kristeva. To that, abjection, us versus them, alienation, and fetishization is one of four main Gothic theories my book series utilizes, the other three being hauntology, retrofuture, cryptonomy, showhide, and chronotopes, time-space, alongside smaller theories, e.g. Gerald Hogel's Ghost of the Counterfeit, re. Raising Awareness, footnote 1, and Barbara Creed's Monstrous Feminine, Gorgons and Amazonimachia as I study it. As a queer sex worker and academic, I dialectically materially prioritize abjection and vampirism through unpaid labor. Chiefly sex work is exploited by Cartesian dualism and its harmful maximalist binaries under capitalist realism, treating nature as monstrous feminine, re. Nature is food. But mention the other theories too. Access four main Gothic theories, the 4Gs in paratextual documents for their longer definitions. In essence, capital, the state, rape by design, which unpaid labor prevents by breaking capitalist realism mid-abjection, i.e. reversing abjection during Little Gothic BDSM, rape play, when having the whore's revenge, which state vampirism explores at length, to break the profit and productivity motive by making a world for which it and rape are no longer possible using these methods, i.e. by using the same demonic and slutty language capital does, but at cross purposes. Source: Rape Reprise. New terms, eco-Socialism. I wrote a few new terms for Gothic intersectionality, with older ones appearing deeper in, re. Some definitions. Mendacious consumption, Gothic intersectionality, and state cannibalism. I'm listing them again up front to stress and catalog them, but also mention alongside another book whose own eco-socialist views informed my own, Patel and Moore's A History of the World in 7 Cheap Things. The book was a gift, one that helped shape my work through the presence of friendly people, mainly sex workers preyed on by capital, e.g. Kuwu below, the giver of the book in question, and a self-avowed Marxist-Leninist all about environmental activism. I've already read the definitions, but if you want to go over them again, you can. All concern state predation and resisting it, i.e. alongside state vampirism, normally to some degree invisible, overhead, below. It bears mentioning how I coined predation as already an undead phenomenon, vampirism as something more gradual, and whose abrupt cannibal side of the coin, the zombie, highlights the Promethean aspect of something normally cheap. While much has been made of its gory and oppressive history, one fact is often overlooked. Capitalism has thrived not because it is violent and destructive, it is, but because it is productive in a particular way. Capitalism thrives not by destroying natures, but by putting natures to work, as cheaply as possible. Source 7 Cheap Things. This essay in particular attempts to confront when cheapness isn't possible, and when capital, normally frugal, begins to ransack and eat itself alive mid-apocalypse, the frontiers creeping inwards. Eco-Socialism continued, dedication to Bay and birthday wishes. Speaking of eco-socialism and 7 Cheap Things, it's one of my husband Bay's favorites, with Bay being a disabled Irish Malay ecologist and sex worker below. Bay told me so shortly before I started writing Gothic Intersectionality. I wrote it for them, and for others in the world going through similar struggles. I dedicate this essay to you, Muffin, and strive to heal the world through the connections you inspired. You're a constant marvel in my life, my magic potion, my taonga, my rain. But if I should not hear, smell, or feel, or see you, you would still define me, disperse me, wash over me. Source, Hona Farwa. Two Fawars, Rain, 1970. Happy birthday, cutie, and many more to come. I love you with all my heart. Saying thanks to John and Jessie, this piece weds John the Duncan and Jessie the Gender's work to mind through as Gothic Intersectionality, given their work's centrality in crystallizing it, and how much I, a random fan, enjoy theirs. I wish to quickly say thanks. John and Jessie, this essay and its titular idea couldn't exist without you. It was made while synthesizing your work with mine, both in terms of subject matter and ipso facto, or as someone like Ben Empanada made work I once consumed, meaning until he crashed out, growing more and more fascist over time. Ari, raising awareness, you two have always been cool. To John, your work on neoliberalism helped shape my own book series, exploration thereof. Ari, from my book series Acknowledgements. To John the Duncan, neoliberalism can be a difficult concept to wrap one's head around, and your videos about it explain everything succinctly and well, e.g. neoliberalism, class war, and pacification. You also discuss gender theory and activism against genocide in your work, which revolves around preventing it vis-à-vis neoliberalism in your own PhD material. Read, you're introducing me to universal class subject, utterly instrumental in my own focus on sex work that you omit from care work. RA State Vampirism, footnote 1. In short, you're an inspiration of mine, and helped me wrap my head around academia and the application tied to all of these things, and Foucault in prisons. I never watched your chicken run video. To Jessie, your nonstop work on trans rights and intersectionality also proved vital. And while I've mildly critiqued both of you before, above, you took it in stride, so thank you for your grace and fine work. You're both rock stars. Persephone, 7/18/2026. To my readers, the idea of friendship and working together is a deeply transformative one. Important. It's why I consume and digest the work of other people, i.e. merging that of those I don't know in person any more than I do Shelley or Marx, with those I do relate to more intimately. Friendship matters because it enhances what we produce and helps us see things we may not otherwise, a bit like a magic potion. My partner Victoria, for instance, told me recently that I have a cute lisp. I had no idea any more than I realized I was neurodivergent when Ginger told me. Already coming out being trans neurodivergent. 2022. Keeping it in mind, I suddenly realized why I write the way I do, specifically my syntax and word selection. I never really thought about it before, but I realized that my lisp, which I didn't know about, was influencing my work. I was changing the way that I write subconsciously because the letter S is hard for me to say, especially multiples in quick succession between prefixes and suffixes. All this time and 10 books into my career, and I suddenly understand what seemed arbitrary. No one told me but Victoria, but I'm glad they did. Such is the power of friendship, exposing things we can't see, even though it should be obvious. Things aren't always. Ginger, who also told me I'm a puppy girl. How did you know? I asked, amazed and abashed. But also, why are puppy girl trans women even a thing? Ginger replied, due to a rise in fascism, many trans girls and boys try to think of something that's universally loved, cared for, and isn't a threat. The puppy. Source Unto the Breach. Footnote 39. To it, I am and have always been trans. Trans people are always trans, but like butterflies transform into their genuine selves, shedding the liminal shell before leaving it behind. In short, to become what I truly am, I had to use the Promethean quest to destroy that which heteronormatively was assigned to me at birth. I had to, in a poetic sense, become a god to self-determine and self-express beyond what heteronormative society allowed. Source, poison was the cure. The puppy side, by comparison, was more of a cosmetic choice for me, i.e. from spending time with Bay, a Therian, but also Kuwu, who wanted to color me. The point here is that queer eggs crack, then hatch in proximity with other queer people, and furries become furries by spending time with other furries. The inclination is congenital. The transition and maintenance are social, communal, learned, with my puppy girl renaissance happening years after I came out, and Bay helping me trust that process by not making it weird, as Kubu kind of did, to be frank. Wide load on front-loading things, cropping the pin-up, and following Alice from older arguments featuring Blood Bunny. I often categorize Medusa as a wide load, Freud's archaic mother something to consume and process in all the usual puns and mirror-like devices below, i.e. the Gothic historically affords in liberating nature and those of nature from state predation, expanding state vampirism, as I call it, to include cannibalism, vampire cannibal equals neoliberal fascist. Alice was a rabbit, the thing could chase and eat that, when consumed, transforms radically our view of the world, and whose dark, uncanny, and wasp-like qualities tied to Gothic intersectionality we'll unpack as we go. This invariably requires an introduction to my work, which delves into poetics we don't have time to fully unpack. Refer to my Amazon research, which includes the Gorgon extensively per nature as monstrous feminine, i.e. to further reverse objection with. This essay works like an onion. Preface highlights said work's wider scope and gives additional ideas and authors to consider, i.e. as Gothic intersectionality contributes to, unpacking certain things to some degree as we go, e.g. duality and magic potion seeds, radical transformation through consumption, etc. From there, some definitions leads to the essay body, the core, discussing capital's roots and intersection points, followed by the original prototype. I'll consider state predation as something to reverse along Promethean lines, two subjects I've already written extensively about. Our focus here is cannibalism, not vampirism in either direction, i.e. a black mirror showing different hard truths, the sort Medusa revels in. Prometheus was a cannibal, eating nature as food. But so are we, and whose mendacious consumption goes both ways, terror a tool for liberation mid-exploitation, riding past wrongs against nature, workers, and the planet. For anything we can unpack here, the footnotes give you different rabbits to follow and holes to tumble down, food to eat. Everyone lies, everyone eats, the Gothic concerned with fakery through consumption, digging up and touching on taboo things. State predation does so in bad faith, to portray workers and defile nature, dividing the two and making the latter uninhabitable while blaming the former, especially the horror of those treated like whores, i.e. those who can think, capitalist realism boiling down to different oppressed groups who won't betray other groups, e.g. slutty women with brains, witches to hunt, then tokenize for testifying through survival, re. policing the whore. Anti-predation includes Athena's Aegis, famously decorated with Medusa's head. What, in straight white guys, I call useful dead, which data essentially amounts to, and consumption the means of exchange, the tragedy of past victims but also survivors and their ghosts, through said displays. This includes state abuse, e.g. the weaponizing of the Holocaust and Star of David on the Israeli flag through muscular Jews, abusing anti-Semitism to uphold global U.S. hegemony through a rabid vassal state, essentially William Blum's What If, regarding the Nazis had they not turned west, re Killing Hope, 2003. In a Radcliffean sense, the dead on the flag are skulls behind which theft occurs, but through the Gorgon, the classic target of state predation, can easily turn against the state. Our focus for anti-predation being sex work of a rude kind, are a nothing gross, so-called hard kinks. Even so, predation equals to feed, and anti-predation to defend from feeding, which doesn't preclude feeding in reverse, e.g. imitation through disguised feeding. An owner-pet dynamic we'll explore during caveats. I've since tailored the images here to be more lateral in their approach, i.e. their nudity mostly hidden to make it more accessible when playing with fire. Sex equals code enacted by gorillas of different kinds lurking under the skin. Above. What is or isn't nude is entirely subjective, surviving under a Protestant ethic, i.e. one that per all the usual contradictions capital state predation demands, e.g. sex bad, sex sells, pimping nature as sinful in service to profit, re censorship and double standards regarding sex work, or capitalism the Protestant ethic in passing from my Patreon in 2026. Is a bare belly or side boob nudity in the pornographic sense? That depends on context. Pornography entirely subjective under state mandates, i.e. that rape by design, legalizing sex work versus decriminalizing it to rape it sometimes because paying for it, dignifying it, is too expensive and antithetical to state predation. To that, are trans people, sex workers, and/or public nudism actually killer vampires despite seemingly fighting for their collective rights? Michigan's House Bill number 4938, aka the Corruption of Public Morals Act, certainly acts like it. Such puritanical arbitrations, already bad faith, categorically enforce profit, thus rape, genocide, ecocide in Promethean ways, to protect our viewers by being advertiser-friendly while the planet catches on fire and its destroyers, the elite, happily warm themselves by the ashes versus surrender power to put out the flames. For we whores invested in eco-Socialism, it's not the planet's on fire, look boobs. It's look boobs, the planet's on fire. Get your priorities straight, but also remember that exploitation and liberation share space. We commie sluts, and commie or otherwise, ring alarm bells without exploiting ourselves. Predation a matter of context in duality. It's the elephant in the room, an albatross creating tension for those who get tense, and releasing it for those who don't. Don't blame whores for genocide, which ecocide is. Listen to them when they speak out, using what they have to speak to slices of predation at large. Capitalism far too big to tackle in one go, and/or alone. With Gothic Intersectionality focusing on Prometheus and transformation to punch up with during mendacious consumption, while Gothic ludology stresses a weapons and armor nudity of Gorgons and Amazons to basically do the same thing. The Promethean quest, a constant fascination of mine, ranging from my master's thesis in 2018 to military optimism in 2021 and my Metroidvania corpus in 2025. I digress. These images are cropped, hiding genitals and female nipples, while white female nudity are focus here. My book series at large, including GNC and/or BIPOC bodies, e.g. my husband Bay Ryan, shown earlier and deeper in, alongside many other queer non-white models of the 100+ volunteers my book series features. Should you click on them, though, the truth of these beautiful liars, telling truth with lies, of a feast for the eyes cake-like sort, to free worker minds, ranging from Plato's shadows, simulacra, to Milton's darkness visible, and Satan, to Swift's splendid Mendax, to Shelley's creature, to my revolutionary cryptonomy reversing objection, see footnote 6, shall then show the truth fully nude. To that, the state, white, straight, and male, therefore heteronormative, secular, colonial, and Cartesian to monopolize violence, terror, and monsters, see footnote 1, blames and rapes nature as whore for state abuse. The elders struggle, the oldest monster blowing the whistle. We give nature a voice on the aegis. Gothic communism, a dialectical material approach, communicating holistically through food and lies, doing little Gothic BDSM, to engender Gothic intersectionality for the whore's revenge, preventing rape in frankly poetic ways. Let's speak honestly about with sex as a social sexual practice, e.g. Bunny above and below is ace, re the finale. This happens by challenging all bigotries, e.g. racism, sexism, ableism, transphobia, etc., i.e. is part of an intersectional problem needing intersectional solutions, camping canonically trashy things, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No scapegoats, no homeless whores, only free ones. Sex work is work. It's a world revolution, you see, and one only starting small, a grower, if you will, Medusa the shower in more ways than one, pushing class war as ass war for Gothic maturity in the bargain, with ass war meaning the liberation of sex work, therefore all work, through revolutionary struggle, i.e. hugging the whore as aliens, seeking revenge through unity, illustrating mutual consent with other objective workers, re. illustrating mutual consent from paratextual Gothic documents. And Gothic maturity meaning the ability to say healthy things through taboo language during Little Gothic BDSM, i.e. while pushing for intersectional solidarity and consciousness, developing Gothic communism, thus universal liberation, through various creative successes that collectively overcome praxial inertia, division, dormancy, and betrayal. Potato. Gothic intersectionality stresses that, mid-intersection, and on the aegis, are terrifying bodies, scaring the pimp-like system to a halt. When the man comes around, show him your aegis. Source, it began with a whisper. The truth will be revealed. Alice and all rabbits, avatars of the Gorgon, the numinous, any gender homewrecker, reversing state predation, cryptonomy, and abjection. Dark oracles, scratching Prometheus in anti-predatory ways to expose the house of pain, of rape he built on their backs, rattling the pimp, and reversing cryptonymically the terror-counter-terror binary made abjection is entirely the point. With her terrifying powers, as Creed puts it, from Medusa as Queen Bee to her scary offshoots below. None of this occurs to a fair fight. Anything goes, being the state's default. So that is likewise our baseline. Seeking to survive their predation as tricksters, imposters, shapeshifters, what have you. Hard bitches, soft bodies. All is par for the course. Classically a woman or anything treated like a woman, the whore is always on the back foot, or her back, her knees. While being forced to defend herself from the crimes the state pins onto her, as something to eat, cake or otherwise. It's a larger refrain and a smaller one, a dialectical material, chaos, chorus, speaking here to a dialectic of the alien, which Medusa is, and what whores in general symbolize, as something to hug and believe, a palliative numinous, re. hugging the alien. Doing so exposes the truth of the system as predatory, something not simply vampiric from Marx, but cannibalistic from Dutt. Capital sexualizes everything from me to rape everything by design, also from me, and through all the usual qualities and monopolies, see footnote 1. We whores codify and consolidate that reality where power is stored and fought over with, sex policed through force. Nature is monstrous feminine. In our hands, sex turns into a forceful argument to persuasively tip the scales and cheat however we can, deceiving the deceiver inside a rigged game, making everyone hungry. The scapegoat punches up, essentially. In doing so, the state and its defenders will call us rude, will liken us to ancient predators, tricksters, and avengers that, like Medusa, need to be corralled, sequestered, and concentrated, lest civilization be raped, capital having so much rape apologia cryptonyms in that respect, e.g., development. Like Medusa, we fuck back in duality by using our weapons, our own power reclaimed upon ourselves in potion-like ways, to cannibalize the state and its young as routinely fed us on drip, to eat Rome from within, a dark potion that hijacks state vampirism, cannibalism, to revive communism in wasp-like ways, an imposter eating its host's prey babies, re. the caterpillar and the wasp. The state isn't completely stupid, but they also don't care about us. They fear us because they need us to survive, and want us docile while they eat us alive. Why hold back, tying our hands behind our backs, without consent, for those in their Promethean system raping us? A fair fight is a myth, a fool's errand. Fight fire with fire, all's fair in love and war. Illustrate mutual consent. Humanize the harvest with objectifying language, terrifying those who rape us. From top to bottom, hit it from the front and the back, like the vampire do, or the cannibal, sub or otherwise. Code is code. Smuggle something inside, meaning your bread, not state loaves hiding fascism, i.e. that, when consumed, like Alice and her cake, changes others for the better, an embryo whose nutrients carry data and strength forwards from the past. Note, while the total workout for Gothic intersectionality is over 3,000 words, the essay body is about 7,500. Everything else, this portion, the preface, definitions and footnotes, etc., are icing on the cake to acclimate you to my work as undeniably rich, dense, and hopefully tempting. Should I have a slice of the forbidden? Gee, I'm not sure. Don't be shy. Take a bite. Persephone, 7/19/2026. Preface. White straight guys grimly concluded how capital is Promethean, state vampirism a system of theft preceded by bad actors playing God, with fire, etc. Gothic villains lie, rape, and steal in bad faith. Gothic heroines expose them and the system they serve by facing the complications that result. This unmasking navigates confusion, sometimes undercover, but always in enemy territory overlapping with home. Formerly an afterthought, I've given Gothic intersectionality space to grow and explore that idea, i.e. beyond singular cases or even people, i.e. while keeping the Promethean myth squarely in mind, the root of the problem that white straight guys represent. It attacks the system responsible, capital as Promethean, pimping nature to wreck the globe. In doing so, and facing fascism and climate catastrophe thanks to neoliberalism, it uses the Promethean myth and Cartesian hubris to holistically and dualistically push for Gothic intersectionality, doing little Gothic BDSM, combining teamwork and play. It considers this idea through the magic potion seed trope, commenting on cannibalism, transformation, and dark desire, i.e. revenge, survival the rape victim's revenge, re. the horror reversing objection, foiling state predation to dismantle capitalism, by being rude, like the eagle true Prometheus, eating his liver as full of what he stole from us while destroying our lives and homes. Apart from that idea, fighting fire with fire, metaphor as code for political action and data exchange, and John and Jessie's work, which I mentioned up front, and who discuss intersectionality less gothically than I do, but no less importantly through their own emphasis on neoliberalism, rape prevention, will reference other terms of mine too, e.g. the wisdom of the ancients and the ancestors per indigenous thought, payback's a bitch, and Avengers, nature is monstrous feminine, castrating, capital is Promethean, aren't nice. Their would-be abusers aren't gods, but men and token parties of flesh and blood, not immune to violence, terror, and monsters, reflected back at them on the aegis, whose anti-predation means of topping from below intersect on the frontier, point of reckoning to break state monopolies, ergo, capitalist realism. Duality, another important idea we don't have time to unpack here, but already have elsewhere, re from Gothic ludology, transplanted from a response to Bridget Empire, whose Amazonian focus explores duality and satire for good praxis, developing communism using Gothic poetics. Satire is theater, which incorporates comedy and drama on any stage. Duality simply means both sides use it, workers and nature, versus owners and those who serve them, the state guiding thought, thus action, through the usual circuits outside our bodies, avatars and conduits themselves. There's no set function. Instead, they double each other regardless of venue or form. To it, duality repeats a lot here, as do terms like aegis, anisotropic and abject, etc., alongside Amazon's an accidental ode to the letter A, it would seem. Aegis equals abjection as something to reverse, terrorist, counter-terrorist, and anisotropic, apotropaic, and asymmetrical ways. To that, Little Gothic BDSM and Gothic ludology equal playing with fire, especially hazardous and essential for its duality, ability to change what isn't singular or set, and all the more potent when used through Gothic intersectionality to punch up and develop Gothic communism. My emphasis being sex work, but capital is something that sexualizes everything to different degrees. Footnote 1. In doing so, any criticism or dismantling of capital authored by Gothic intersectionality, alongside my book series, pointedly speaks to neoliberalism as the dominant strain of capital under capitalism, capitalist realism, the wellspring from which fascism currently flows. Capital, specifically neoliberal capital, versus Marxist-Leninism, which I examine elsewhere, raising awareness, is this paper's focus, synonymous therein with state vampirism, treating liberation of nature as end of the world, distracting from the owner class and their supporters having caused climate change, aka state shift. May my husband, a mildly Irish ecologist and disabled theory and sex worker above, having continuously shaped my research, Ari, as co-writer of our book series, though we already operated as eco-socialists before crossing paths, e.g. my work on Tolkien, including his racism, selective environmentalism, in which Bay, being indigenous and from New Zealand, had thoughts on regarding Jackson's films that shaped my own. On New Zealand, R.E. Peter Jackson cannibalizing the Maori, a New Zealand labor at large, to channelize BIPOC and smash unions. Vaudeville is vaudeville, and taking state pay without adding irony is ultimately still betrayal, race or otherwise, the pimping of one's own culture under generational trauma, having turned into power fantasies for the colonizer group, middle class in the global north. Source, Dead on Arrival. All things the state, specifically fascism, calls useless eater, which extends to socialist states and actors with fascist elements, e.g. Bad Empanada targeting my friends, most being GNC, and many being plural disabled BIPOC and or furry sex workers, when calling them useless eaters, below. A classic example of fascist cannibalism through that label are disabled people, with German interwar veterans disabled from the war and its comorbidities having preyed on German revolutionaries in 1918 with the Freikorps, only to have, word I can't pronounce, and similar parties for disabled veterans dissolved and absorbed into the NSKOV and ultimately euthanized by the state's T4 program. Such things run countercurrent to indigenous beliefs about disabled people, what the Maori call taonga, meaning treasure, Ari unto the breach, footnote 23. Many disabled people, for that matter, are sex workers and or trans, e.g. the Whores of Weimar, Ari, joy under fascism. Gothic communism is holistic and eco-socialist for a reason. Capital rapes by design. Capital, intrinsically Promethean, self-destructive but harming nature, feeds in all directions, kicking up dust when binging and purging to conceal its own farm food source, what Aspinall and Duncan call soil, in which vampires use to rest and digest but also conceal ongoing predation, and cannibals to bury the bones. State Darvo and obscurantism, framing nature, the victim, as monstrous feminine criminal, terrorist, and whore. Capital essentializing its older pimping for profit currently. Intersectional problems require intersectional solutions, the roots of fascism intersecting like those of a hellish tree, and requiring communism to double and meet it there, a theme this essay takes from my book series at large, including its dialectic of the alien hugging said alien, re nature the Gorgon is wasp-like, i.e. humanizing the harvest, while crossing matters of class, culture, and race, and especially when dealing with fascism, tokenism, e.g. TERFs, and neoliberalism. To shock the system and transform it, thus survive, we must boldly poke and prod whatever's needed to till the soil, turning it over. Only then can workers free themselves from planetary bondage, uniting efforts across the world to engender a world ecology, as Patel and Moore call it, one that combats state shift. Inside the capitalist scene, Gothic heroines, regardless of gender, exposing Gothic villains in solidarity, wasp or otherwise. The dead conserve said aims, a Medusa's mirror shield, Athena's Aegis a black mirror, but demand a certain comorbid comfort while consuming them differently than capital, i.e., Prometheus was a bad actor, stealing fire for the state, and whose modern riddle is classically dualistic, e.g. the Tabernacle is Prometheus, and those he defends are Bad Empanada, stealing fire to feed in bad faith while playing the savior and the victim. We walk the same road, one more painful antidotes to Prometheus, fascism, and its cannibalism under capital, encapsulate fearsome things, which wasps are, to eat and pass data, wisdom, fire, forwards, with magic potions and seeds made from the dead, the past having the power to cryptonymically confront and transform state predation, function equals flow. Reversing objections flow using mad science, Gothic poetics, bitches love science, bad bitches, mad science, the xenomorph inspired by the wasp during the modern Prometheus, R.E. Geiger xenomorph. What our essay here, which mostly limits to Patel and Moore's 7 Cheap Things, alongside John and Jessie and myself, with other examples appearing sporadically throughout, e.g. George Rockwell's Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism, another sterling and recent trumpet for intersectionality we don't examine here, having already done so in Tactical Frivolity, is Cynthia Aruza's Feminism for the 99%, a manifesto, Feminism must be anti-capitalist, eco-socialist, and anti-racist. Ari, as Patel and Moore write, thus a revolutionary politics of sustainability must recognize and mobilize through the contradictions of a tripartite division of work under capitalism, labor power, unpaid care work, and the work of nature as a whole. Worker exploitation is bound together with the appropriation of extra-human nature and the unpaid work of care, my emphasis again being sex work. Source: Seven Cheap Things. There's also older forms of intersectionality these books and similar authors build on, e.g. the Black Panthers. Prince Shakur's How the Black Panther Party Organized a Revolution, and non-white trans people at the Stonewall Uprising like Marsha P. Johnson, taken too soon. Inclusion and diversity are strength, insofar as cooperation versus state predation and state shift is the only way we survive. We must intersect. Anything else ecocide in the face of capital is wholly unsustainable and unstable, i.e. Promethean, i.e. segregation no defense, silence genocide, and assimilation poor stewardship, which reductionism boils down to, celebrating ignorance to defend blind spots. From their seminal eco-socialist book, Seven Cheap Things, stressing holistic intersectionality par excellence, various terms here come directly from it, including world ecology, state shift, capitalistine, and real abstractions, etc. It also appears in White Straight Guides to consider both sides of the Promethean coin, the individual thief and system of theft, but especially its afterthought portion, heroines and villains. Prometheus was a villain who, in Shelley's modern invocation of the myth, embodied capital as causing great harm globally to enrich the ruling class and trash the planet, state predation founded on Cartesian thought, i.e. making demons. Time is a circle, but the land can only give so much before it spins out for good. We're obviously referencing the Promethean myth here, thus Shelley's Frankenstein and its many revivals, e.g. Alien, and many others dumping Shelley and Marx for Freud eclipsing their specters, re. Ghosts of Freud. And while I'm totally proud of my scholarship on this subject, which this essay adds to, also consider Alton Shay's material, e.g. Jurassic Park is basically just Frankenstein and the sexual politics of Frankenstein. What Nietzsche called the gay science, cited by Patel and Moore in their book's introduction, and one that Gothic commies apply to Marx, already a Gothicist, to make him gayer, more accessible to universal liberation than he actually was, which Gothic intersectionality essentially speaks to, re. making Marx gay.